Hello everyone, what's up? Our community spotlight this month features a 40k Death Guard Tallyman by James, a 30k Alpha Legion Rhino by Stephan, and 3 30k Imperial Fists tanks by Alex. Whether you're a wargamer or a scale modeler, if you want to learn more about weathering, start now by subscribing and clicking the bell. So hello Stephan, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Hello Enrique.
How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, yeah. Had a little mess up with my current models, but other than that, doing quite fine.
Happens to all of us, it's part of the process. Yeah. In tonight's community spotlight, I would very much like to know more about your Rhino, your Alpha Legion Rhino.
Yeah, so basically what I did is obviously a non-metallic Alpha Legion scheme. I started that because when I started the Alpha Legion, I didn't have an airbrush, and I thought getting the metallic scheme was too difficult without it, and I didn't want to just refer to the contrast paints, which seems to be a solution to me. But I ended up doing this scheme where I basically do a zenithal and then go over with a turquoise and either get the shades in blue and the highlights a bit more in a green to get the to get a nice modulation of turquoise on it, and that suited me quite fine because when I started the weathering, this is my second Rhino I did with using an airbrush and really applying weathering techniques. I basically did a sponge chipping technique on it, which really I think gave a nice overall tone to the armor, where I can sort of semi-highlight it with a sponge with a lighter chipping layer and then paint in those chips with a darker gray, which for me wasn't too difficult because I know I have quite a steady hand doing it, but it was quite time-consuming to do it in that way. So I'm not sure if sponge chipping will be the excellent solution going from rhinos to larger tanks in the future. If I compare it to your chipping technique, which might take you half an hour on the tank, it took me 3 hours just to do the chipping on this tank. I like the result though, but not sure if the straining of my back and my neck was worth it for larger tanks.
It is a lovely result. I think of all the elements of your Rhino, or your Rhinos, I should say. I mean, it's 2 of them, right?
Yeah. So the one on the right was the first Rhino I did, and it was actually the first tank I tried this technique on. So using an airbrush for the first time, and doing the chipping technique and pigments for the first time, which is the other part, the weathering I basically used on this tank. It's a lot of pigments to do the rust effects, and later on the dust and the sand effects.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that the Alpha Legions, I want to do a desert-like scheme on them, or a desert theme on them, which I thought was going to be really easy because I thought mud was difficult, but to be honest, getting dust right was more difficult than I thought, especially to make it look deserty. And I put both tanks there in the picture because then you can see where what I tried on this tank a lot is to get those dusts and the desert theme, the feel better, because I think that was lacking in the other tank, in my opinion.
Right. Well, I was going to say that what I like best in terms of all the elements that I can see in the second Rhino is the chipping is really great, and the rust effects are very, very, very good indeed. Very tasteful. I also think the combination of colors in terms of both the scheme that you adopted, that you've already explained, but also how that plays with the rust tones and the sand, I think it's a really, really great combination.
It was quite an experiment. I didn't know when I started this was going to go quite right, and I think it has to do with the underlining components of the turquoise color. If you add some yellowish sand, it emphasizes the green a bit more because it turns a bit green if you put a light layer on. Same goes for the orange, which is complementary. So if you do the rust on it, it creates a nice effect, and it worked out. I can't. It wasn't planned. It was really a discovery for me to do the tank in this way.
Some of the best results we can ever get as modelers happen this way, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Sometimes you just have to try and go for it and see where it ends. And I guess that's why I also used pigments a lot in this tank. It's because they're so forgiving. All I did was add water, if I even added water to them, and you can just remove all of it, which means they're even more forgiving than the enamels, which I only now started to use more and more because I know I can get these results and I'm comfortable with the colors I can achieve and the rust, etc.
Right,
A bit
exactly.
more.
Couldn't agree more about the pigments. We've talked about several positives. What about difficulties? What were the main challenges for you in this project?
The main challenge in this product was, I guess, myself trying to do better than the previous tank. What I had quite a lot of difficulty with is getting the lighter pigment tones sticking on the tank once you do the fixer, because they have a tendency to just disappear or get washed away, which means a lot of dust effects just disappeared. And trying to maintain those and keep them on the tank, I thought was quite difficult. And especially on the tracks, when I set myself the goal of doing better than the previous tank to make it look like there's more sand on it instead of patches of sand or
Right.
dirt-like sand. Um, yeah, I thought that was difficult, getting the result and getting it, blending it in when I started, because I started with the more extreme effects and then slowly got to the dust effects, at which point it started to look better and better. But especially when I just, because I used some texture paint on the tracks as well, when I just put that on, it just contrasted extremely with the rust tones, and I was like, oh, this is. I really hope this is going to turn out the way I wanted to. So the real challenge of the tank was myself, I think.
What did you enjoy the most, though? What was the most fun? You've talked about chipping, how that took you a pretty long time, but was rewarding in the end. What element in the whole project was the most fun for you?
I really like doing the transfers. I just not necessarily doing the transfers on the tank, but once you get to chip the transfers and you add a layer and another layer and another layer on top of that, they just blend in quite a lot. So I really love doing that. Um, and I think the, the nicest step to do was doing the dust. To be honest, I think the first dust layer, because I basically did a pin wash with pigments, just mixed in with water, and that was very relaxing. So that was probably the nicest part of the tank.
It's a bit like playing with mud when we're kids, right?
Yeah, yeah, it is, and then you just peel off what you don't like, add a little bit more, and that was extremely relaxing. Um, so I think I enjoyed that one the most, especially because it's also the on the one of the final stages on the tank. So it just becomes better and better. You're really putting the cherries on the cake. Yeah,
Stefan, you've become a really active member in our little Discord community. Was there a discussion that perhaps inspired you to do this or that you found helpful along the way?
I think there were three things that I recall that really helped me a lot. Like I said, I really struggled with trying to get my own expectations fulfilled when doing the tracks. And somewhere halfway the tracks, I think I posted some pictures, and I was like, this is not gonna happen. I don't think this is gonna turn out the way I wanted to. And I think you and some others basically persuaded me, like, continue. This is looking really good. And yeah, so I continued, and that really worked out. So I guess that was yeah, that was my motivational push I needed and I got that from the Discord community. Um,
Happy to
I
hear
think
that.
yeah, yeah,
The tracks
and
look
yeah,
great, by the way.
yeah, I really like the result now, but during the project, it was like I said, yeah. Now it's cool, and now I really need this motivational boost to do this style of tracks. No, this process works for my future tanks. Another thing that I found really helpful was some advice on doing the cabling, because I basically did a small conversion doing a heavy bolted turret, and I decided to add some cables, and I painted those cables in the colors I wanted, but I had no idea how to weather those. There was no technique. I was like, do you chip these? Do you just run pigments along? And I think someone on Discord just said, like, yeah, just dry brush some gray on it, see how that works. And that worked beautifully.
Mhm.
It's a very simple solution. Would have never guessed that was the way forward.
Uh,
And I think the final thing that I recall Discord really helped me is that someone gave me a lot of compliments on the medals, because I really like how I I've sort of tried to play around with how to do medals, getting the true metallic medal looking right, and someone gave me a couple of compliments on that, and I was like, okay, so then this is probably a good way forward. This is something I need to repeat and write down and use this approach on the next projects as well.
Fully agree. And I particularly like the fact that it's realistic. Actually, it's gritty. It's not super shiny, highlighted metals. It's the way that they would actually look like on the battlefield, in my opinion. So, kudos. That's the way.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, yeah. Well, it's good to yeah, good to see something work out the way you planned it, even if it's just an experiment. That's always great as a modeler. You try a lot of different things, and not everything follows the exact plan you had in mind most of the time. But you know, when something turns out, you're like, and it really looks good, and other people say this looks good. You're thinking like, okay, I should write this down for myself. I need to use this. This experiment turned out. That's always great.
Well, in my opinion, Stefan, this is a really good example of what Alpha Legion in 30K should really look like. There's a tendency, I don't know why, but there's clearly a tendency to doing Alpha Legion in this sort of very hyper highlighted with aggressive airbrush gradients, a lot of edge highlights, all very kind of garish. I'm hoping that it inspire other 30K painters to follow suit, really.
Yeah, I hope it does as well. I hope people also, when they see a rhino, they decide to put some more effort in their rhinos. Some people, you know, go all the way on every model. Um, I really like the Dymas pattern rhino design, but if you just it's just perfect to do because it's often it's usually just a transport tank people add because they just need it in the game, um, and if you just take it a bit more, a couple of steps more, which is not that difficult to achieve if you use just a couple of pigments. Um, you don't have to do the 3 hour sponge chimping I did. That's not, totally not required. But when you do that and you put it next to a squad, it just yeah, it's a force multiplier in
Yeah,
aesthetics.
exactly. Lastly, Stefan, I had a question for you regarding the future for you as a modeler. So, what do you see yourself doing in a few weeks or a month's time, either with Alpha Legion or with other armies or projects?
Well, I've seemed to finding myself in quite a nice spot because I wouldn't say I got bored about the turquoise color. It's nice to paint, but it's a lot of the it's been half a year doing the same thing for me right now. But my Alpha Legion are there at the point I'm starting to add tanks. So I'm thinking about I'm obviously finishing the first Rhino, the third Rhino in the line. Um, we're gonna try some different modeling techniques on with the camera netting, see how that works out. But the Alpha Legion are in a position where I'm gonna add tanks, and now that I've basically tried all kinds of different things um, on these rhinos and on the land speeders, I know what way I want to head with those tanks, so that's good. But as a alternative to that, I've started painting up some world leaders, which allow me to do some more infantry, and where I want to do some more enamels and yeah, use different techniques as well. And that I think switching between those is going to be the way forward for me.
Interesting. Very interesting. That's all for now, Stefan. Thank you very much for coming tonight to the show. And I hope to have you again in the next or one of the next spotlights, maybe
Yeah,
with some
sure.
world leaders. How about that?
That'd be close to your heart, right?
Yes, it would. Thank you very much.
Yeah, a pleasure.
See ya.
Bye.
So, hello, James. Good evening.
Hey, Enrique. Good to talk to you again.
Very happy to have you here for the second time.
I think, is it the third time? Third time on the showcase, I think.
Third time on the showcase, second time we interview you, right?
Yes, correct.
And hopefully many more to come.
Yes, definitely. I've got lots of plastic to get through, so that's not a problem. Supply is not an issue.
So tell our viewers a bit more about this latest project of yours. What has it entailed? How's the journey been for you?
So this is the Death Guard Tallyman. So he counts Nurgles, armies, and I don't know, contagions, legions, all that sort of stuff. So he's a lovely fellow. But the good news is as well, I'm sure you'll be really pleased, but there's a new version of Warhammer 40,000. I know you're very excited. But he's actually so in the previous edition, this guy was rubbish. But he's actually looking really good this version, so that's going to be quite nice since I painted him. But my girlfriend bought him for me about a year and a half ago, so I've been meaning to paint him for ages. He was originally green, and then obviously I've got the airbrush, so I kind of did him with like a rust undercoat, and then I kind of tried to very lightly bring up the weathered wood, which is a secret weapon paint. And I'm
Hmm.
still kind of needing to work on my techniques. I think I'm just a bit too heavy-handed with the airbrush, and I kind of that you can't really see very much of the rust in the background. But I think the effect is still quite good because it's obviously brighter. But I do need to work on my sort of color modulation a bit. I think after the armor was done, it was kind of more sort of painting by numbers, but obviously had a lot of there's a hell of a lot of detail on that model, so it did take me a long time. You've got all the purity seals and these weird little abacus with all the skulls, and then
It's a
there's a
really
book.
detail-rich sculpt, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's actually really nice. When I first saw it, I was like, "Oh, what's this about?" And then the more I've done with it, the more I've actually liked it. And I think it's probably one of my favorite Death Guard models actually for Warhammer 40,000. Um, so I mean, once all the paints were in terms of your acrylics, it's got ammo track wash pretty much all over it, which is obviously the good stuff. And then we've got a dark wash on the green robes, and I think we've got a mix of both on the kind of antenna piece at the top. So that's kind of I think I did sponge chipping with rust on the
Hmm.
top, and then kind of did it again with some silvers, and then I think I did the patina effect on it, and then I've kind of gone over it with all the enamels as well. I think it's kind of turned out quite nicely, so that's been good.
Yeah, it looks
And then
lovely.
I found a dodgy nurgling which I stuck on his base, which happened to fit nicely on the random steps I'd made, so that was all good.
Oh, that's really cool. That was a really nice touch. I didn't know whether that came with the model or not.
It did. He comes with a little nurgling that's carrying a scroll, but he was too big to fit on the base, so I had to dig in my bits box and find this guy. So it was a bit of luck that he actually stands not quite nicely on it.
James, like the previous time, one of the things that I liked the most was the metals. Can you tell us a bit more about how you achieve those tones?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's lead belcher base, and then the gold is brass scorpion, I think. So these are all Games Workshop paints.
Hmm.
And then I will have used a load of acrylic washes. I know not your favorite, but they're good. Just get the initial colors down there, and then basically they'll have a good couple of layers of different enamels in them, and then there will be the tiniest of tiny edge highlighting, but only in appropriate places. So don't worry.
So basically, you've combined acrylic and enamel washes. Is that right?
Not at the same time,
Yeah, yeah,
uh,
but
not mixed, yeah, but in different steps, yeah. And I find it. I think the Games Workshop paints just need that extra layer of acrylic. Otherwise, they're just a bit too flat, a bit too bright, especially for sort of Death Guard. I think if you're going for sort of Custodes or something like that, they'd be fine. But I think for your Death Guard, they need a lot of sort of weather beating acrylic
Mhm.
washes, and then the enamels to sort of finish them off.
Interesting. We tend to think that they are sort of mutually exclusive tools, but they aren't, in fact, are they?
No, no, they work fairly well as long as you get the varnishes on, which I sometimes forget. They don't seem to have any problems.
Speaking of problems, James, were there any?
I didn't have any like major screw ups with this one, but I think if you can see the sort of yellow cables coming off his backpack, there is one of them is like fatter than the others, which is a real pain to bloody do. For some reason, it was just really impossible to get them sort of matching. So I think the one on his right shoulder, I had to sort of redo several times, which was an absolute pain. I didn't really have any like mega screw ups, but I do find this guy. I think he's turned out a little bit too brown. So I think I need to invest in some black wash just to kind of just darken it a little bit.
Okay,
I think
interesting.
it would look nicer. So I think like if you look at his left leg, it looks quite good there. But then on his sort of arm, with these sort of recesses that he's got, he could really do with just a bit of a darker shade in there. I think just to help bring it out a little bit.
Hmm.
I think it's a bit too browny. So I think something I've learned is that I kind of need to invest in the black wash as well, just to be able to get those sort of darker tones.
James, what would you say were the most important lessons for you?
I think one of them is I need to be really careful with cat hairs. So obviously, I've got cats, and this thing is bloody covered in cat hairs. So I think I really need to be careful with trying to make sure that my workstations are clear. Because I think once they've got too many layers on them, there's nothing you can do really. So that's one thing. I think, as I said, I've not really had any problems with this one, but I think the patina effect, I'm practicing that more and more, so that's starting to get better, I think, overall. So I'm quite happy with that. But I mean, with this one was, I suppose, one of the lessons as well was sort of parchments. I've never tried to do script or text before, so that was kind of a big learning curve doing that. Um,
That came out really well.
yeah, apart from
Yeah.
I don't know why it looks like I've written frog on the book. I didn't really mean to write frog. I was just kind of trying to draw some shapes, and then it turned into frog. So I don't know how that happened, but I'll take it.
Could be a secret word.
Yeah, exactly. It fits.
Um, James, what do you think you enjoyed the most?
Um, I mean, obviously, the enamels when they go on, and I've used the streaking rust actually as well. I've got to say, that always sort of makes the model pop. So until that goes on, it looks very unfinished. And as soon as they go on, that's always really nice because it just kind of you're almost finished and you've practically got this finished model that's looking good. So that was a
Really,
big part of it.
really
I think,
transforms it, doesn't it?
yeah, completely. Yeah, it really sort of finishes off the model. I think the face, I think, is probably one of the best faces I've done on a model. Actually, it was really hard to get to it, but it's worked out really well. And then, quite a small detail is you see there's like a red LED on his antenna thing.
Hmm.
I've painted the little white bits on. I've never tried to do that before, but I feel like I'm quite proud of proud of that tiny bit. So I think that bit worked quite well.
What about the basing? I know that you're very particular about your basing. You've
Mhm.
always put in a lot of effort into that.
Well, I think with this one, I did the base a year ago, and then he was undercoated in green from the rattle can ages and ages ago. So I think I just made some little steps for him for some reason, no idea why. And then they kind of looked a bit silly at the back, so I thought I'll bring in Enrique's most favourite scenery material, loads of tufts. So it's absolutely smothered in tufts just to hide any bad bits, basically. But I didn't really know what I was doing with this one. I just kind of threw it together, and it's kind of looks all right when you've hidden it with the nurgling and lots of tufts, so, and the books as well.
Yeah, the Nurgling and the books, that looks awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
One question about materials. You mentioned secret weapon paints before.
Mhm.
I've
Yes.
had experience with their bases, resin bases, which I really,
Mhm.
really liked, but I've never tried their paints or washes.
Yeah.
Any tips there?
So I mean, I used the orange rust. I used that on the Contemptor as well. So that was the undercoat, and that's a really nice orange sort of color, not too bright, and works great there. So, and then I've got the weathered wood, which I think is perfect for Death Guard. It'd probably be good for your World Eaters as well. Actually, it's quite a nice sort
Hmm.
of off white, but it's obviously the Games Workshop whites are bloody terrible, aren't they? So it's really nice compared to those. So I'd definitely recommend those two paints. I have got one other wash, but I've never actually used it, so I can't really comment on that from Secret Weapon.
Is there perhaps a video or a discussion on Discord that served you as inspiration along the way?
Well, I think there tends to be a series of your videos which you first got me into all this sort of stuff, and it's the drop pod videos. I kind of feel like they're kind of my weathering Bible, I would say. So I always find that I refer to those whenever I'm going through the enamel stages or the chipping, because I've kind of been a bit lazy with the chipping. But you'll be pleased to know my next project is fully chipped. My next three, well, 2 units of 2 vehicles and about 7 guys are all chipped.
James, finally, I'd really like to hear about your future or also ongoing projects.
I kind of did a batch of stuff, kind of because you know me, I like to because I don't like cleaning the airbrush. I try and do as much as I can, so I don't have to use it again for a while and I don't have to clean it. So I've got two Mythitic Blight Haulers on the paint queue. So they're both chipped, and I've actually copied your ATST video
Hmm.
where you've done the sort of shading after to kind of give yourself the color modulation.
Right.
So I've actually kind of copied that. I used some Games Workshop washes for the airbrush, and it just really gave the just sort of dialed down some of the shadows. I've kind of the color modulation. I think will be a bit too much for you. I think you might not like it, but it's nice that I've been able to kind of get that effect. Um, so I've got two of those vehicles lined up. They're probably next, and one I've done some
Nice.
one because basically they're mono pose, so you can't really do much different with these vehicles. So one of them I have modified. So he's got sort of like holes in him with maggots coming out.
Oh, nice.
And I found this guy on Facebook had it got ball bearings to use them as eyes. So I've kind of sculpted eyeballs around it and
Huh.
then painted it on. So he's going to have weird little eyeballs all over him as well. So
That
so
sounds
yes, I've got
great. I'm looking forward to that.
yeah, should be good.
Maggots and lots of eyes. Yes.
Yep. And then one just regular one, as well.
The less corrupted one, perhaps.
Yeah, definitely. And I was also seeing some of the guys on Discord have been looking into using nets, for camo nets and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been kind of toying with the idea of possibly doing a net on one of them, just because I can, basically. So I might try that. I don't know. Might have too much going on if I do that.
Sounds good. All right, James, thank you very much for coming into the show a second time, and we hope to see you again soon with more monstrosities, be they Nurgle or otherwise.
Thank you very much.
So, hello, Alex, and welcome back to the Race for Terra.
It's great to be here.
Great to have you here again with more Imperial fists, right?
Correct. Feels like I'm only painting yellow these days.
So this time you brought us 3 tanks, or I should say 2 tanks and 1 super heavy tank. Can you tell our viewers a little bit more about them?
Yeah, kind of. The Sickerans were kind of me testing the waters for the super heavy. So I mean, we had the discussion on the Discord, I think, and I was involved in the discussion on some Facebook groups and on the Bolter and Chain sort of what is the coolest Legion super heavy. And I said so before, and I will say so again, that I think the Falchion is the coolest thing because it's just a giant Sturmgeschütz blown up by like, I don't know, factor 1,000 and given a huge laser gun to hunt Titans, which is like the most Warhammery thing of all Warhammer things to me. Even though I think the Legion Glaive is also pretty cool, I just think nothing tops the ridiculousness of a super heavy tank destroyer, which is kind of just super weird. So I wanted to paint one from day one. And first I wanted to test the waters a bit and also paint some models that I would actually use in normal games below, let's say, 5K.
Right.
Yeah, and so I first painted the sequence because those are actually good and sensible on the table and look cool and are really great era appropriate vehicles in contrast to, for example, I mean, I have 3 Mars Pattern Vindicators and I like those as well, but they're not exactly screaming heresy, you know?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, in terms of aesthetics, it's not the same, is it?
Exactly. And I wanted to have a few vehicles to get that really classic heresy look, and I feel nothing fits that as well as a Sicaran.
So, Alex, one of the things that I like best, of course, you know this already, because we've been over this on the Discord, is the fact that you've gone for a really gritty, weathered look on all 3 tanks. Even the super heavy, which sometimes people are kind of scared to get grimy because it's like a centerpiece in their collection and stuff. So it's a bit more intimidating. Can you tell us a bit about what the weathering entailed for you in terms of your process?
Yeah, I changed it up a bit. So I started with a rust coat this time around and tried my hand at a bit of chipping with acrylics. So I did the rust coat varnished because, as we all know, acrylics are pretty sensitive to chipping, and I didn't want to hurt it. And on the sequence, I actually tried my hand at chipping fluid again, which was a complete disaster. So I had to sponge chip them again. In some places, large swaths of paint came off, like 5 centimeter bits that looked like a ripped T-shirt and not like actual chips, which was horrifying to me. So I had to repaint that with roughly fitting colors in the middle of the blend that was running down a panel, which Jesus Christ sucked. And then I had to sponge chip it all over, which in the end, I mean, thankfully, if all else fails, sponge chipping will always be there for me and for everyone else. So that's always a great solution and always a good way to hide screw-ups. Yeah, and during that process, I found out that the color that chips the hardest by far is my yellow, which is probably because it's the most involved color, because it's a lot of glazing with inks and semi-transparent paints. I actually use contrast paint on that, believe it or not, but just airbrushed because it's pretty cool through the airbrush because you airbrush it by layers, and not only does it get darker as colors tend to do, but it also turns a bit of orange before I shoot in my shadow color. So that's pretty cool, which is why I use it. But that in turn has the deficit or non-benefit of being really hard to chip with chipping fluid.
Right.
So yeah, I have to go back to the drawing board on that one. Really, I haven't found a really good solution yet to that. But yeah, then I found that on my blacks and reds, it actually worked pretty okay with chipping fluid. Just that the Vallejo one really doesn't seem to be that good of a quality. Like you have to thin it before you blow it through an airbrush, which kind of sucks. Just because it seems like bad application, because then it gets wet again when you do a second coat, and chipping fluid shouldn't get wet and stuff like that. So yeah, that happened on the Sigrins and was kind of weird and not good. So I just chipped with a sponge, and then on the Falchion I tried it with liquid mask chipping, which worked really well, like really well, and I liked the way the chips looked. And yeah, then I basically I took what I tried on the Sigrin and applied it on the Falchion. I'm still experimenting with mud. Not yet exactly happy about the mud splashes, but I think that's because for the on the tracks I went for a new method where basically I just rust primed them as well,
right,
and then sponged on some metal and then just mashed them with acrylic and enamel mud products. But the enamel mud products look very much like the base rust color that my rust primer has. I think in the future I'll just put in a few drops of black primer with that, so it's darker, which I guess will be better for the rust base coat anyways. So it'll look a bit, that there'll be more of a difference between the rust colors when the darkest color is darker.
I wanted to go back to something you explained before. Basically, you've mentioned that you've used 3 different methods of chipping, which I think is really interesting. So you've used sponge chipping, you've used liquid mask chipping, and also chipping fluid. And you've told us that, well, throughout the process, you had some difficulties that you've clearly overcome because the end product looks really awesome on all 3 tanks. Are you happy that you experimented and that you try different methods? What do you see yourself doing in the future?
Yeah, sure. What I see myself doing in the future is I threw out the Vallejo chipping fluid and bought the 2 MIG chipping fluids in the hopes that they work better, because you told me great things about them. And yeah, I think I want to mainly stick to liquid mask chipping because I like the effect the best. I mean, we discussed this on the Discord a fair bit. I mean, you can of course go for the ultra high contrast painted on super comic-y chipping, and if that's your thing, like, do it. But for me, it doesn't fit the heresy aesthetic, and I'm not the heresy police, but it doesn't fit what I envision for my army. So I want the more gritty chipping. I'm super glad I experimented. I try being the operative word, to do a new thing on every squad or vehicle that I paint, which with painting techniques and weathering techniques being limited in the number of things that there are. Obviously, you can't always do a new thing, but I try to do new combinations and stuff like that. Like with the Falchion, I was glad that it's such a huge canvas, if you want to put it that way.
Right.
So I could do the doors in white and just experiment with color modulation on white. And actually, I was super pleased with how the chipping looked on the white. And actually, on the lower third of that door, I actually did do a white highlight on the chips, which doesn't punch you in the eye as much because it's already like 70% pure white, very light gray. So it doesn't look as aggressive and gives some depth to the chip.
Looks really great.
Yeah, in general, I really enjoyed having a white surface to work with. I think it's the most streaks I put anywhere on the tank because it just looks good, because you see it very well. And so, yeah, that was fun.
Well, since you just mentioned fun and enjoying the white, is there anything else that you would highlight as, something that was really enjoyable in any of the 3 tanks?
Yeah, always complete assembly, of course. And also a new thing I did is I sprayed muscle burn on each of them, heat burn, and that was super fun. I'm not 100% happy on the Sicaran Venator. I'll do it better on the next one. And I'm pretty happy on the normal Sicaran, and I'm super happy with how it came out on the Falchion.
Big boy.
Yeah, I mean, I had more space to work with and decided to go crazy with the amount of colors and the transitions and threw in some green at the tip just because I had the space, and I think like, yeah, that's a neutral laser, whatever that is supposed to be. And obviously it will do weird things with weird space metals, so they will look weird. And yeah, so I kind of went wild on that, which was cool. Also, yeah, the most fun I had really is, as you always have with tanks, I feel, is that you have large areas where you can go wild on color modulation, or what's not really go wild because it's not out there, but just do a nice color modulation and then chip it really aggressively, apply decals, sponge over the decals, and stuff like that. I really enjoyed that. And yeah, just kind of trying things out and doing things differently. And what I really enjoy about the painting process in general by now is that I don't have any felt pressure in quotation marks anymore, because my army is at 8K or something like that by now. And
wow.
It's not like, oh no, I can't play at my club, because I mean, I can't play at my club, period, till 14th of February at least. But I don't feel pressured in the sense that I can play A-list if I want to, up to a certain point.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, also putting on graphite onto the tracks after they were muddied up and stuff like that was really great. I used the Vallejo acrylic grass. I think you recommended that to me, or someone on the, I think it was you, or some of the guys on the Discord. Whatever, I discovered that it's really cool to put that into the tiny wheels that the tracks run over, and then just go over them with a graphite pen, like really roughly, just over it. And yeah, it looks like a rusted wheel with like a tank growth through grass or a field or whatever, and has really rusted tracks because it's been in the field for a few years. And yeah, it just looks cool. I like it.
To conclude, I wanted to ask you about what the future holds for you as a hobbyist.
Yeah, definitely continuing with my Imperial fists. I sometimes or often think about doing White Scars and or Blood Angels additionally. So I have all 3 legions from the Siege. But I always decide against it because there is something more I want to paint for my fists first. So, And for Christmas, I got a second Sakaran Venator and a Saber. So I'm getting a second Saber, so I have a squad of them, because what am I supposed to do with one? And then I'm painting those into Sick Van, which I plan on the Sakaran. I plan to do an inverted color scheme, so I think it's going to be predominantly black with
Nice.
yellow accents.
I'd like to see that.
Yeah, for the Sabers, I want to paint them more as a vehicle squadron, which is something I haven't done before. So that I paint a command tank and a second guy with a bit more color coding, but with it I have some rough ideas, but nothing fleshed out yet. And yeah, currently I'm painting a bunch of 3D printed Mark II Marines that a friend at the club made for me.
Nice.
And yeah, primarily, I mean, it's Mark II, and getting those is pretty tough. I mean, geez, everybody saw the prices on eBay on those, I guess, and I'm not doing that. And I'm amazed at the quality, really. 3D printing a whole, it's like I don't want to get into the whole out of production thing or whatever. Just gonna say I wanted a squad or two of Mark IIs in my army, which I'm getting in a legal way now, which is good. And I glued on some plastic bits on them because my mate didn't have enough bolter arms in his bits box or 3D print box. And when they're not base or when they're not primed, you see the difference. But after a few coats of paint, you can put them next to a Mark III Marine that is made from plastic, and on the tabletop you won't see the difference. And you have to look really well to see the difference if you put them really close to your nose. I mean, sure, there is some layering, some have mold slips, but resin models do have those too. So I'm pretty sold on 3D printing right now.
I think it's definitely part of the future for the hobby.
Yeah, definitely.
So, Alex, that is all for now. Thank you very much for coming into the show again. And we hope to see you soon with more Imperial Fist tanks in that case.
Probably.
And see you soon. If you also want to participate in a monthly community spotlight like this, compete in our weathering quiz, or participate in online weathering classes, have a look at my Patreon page. Thank you all, and remember, keep it up and weather it out.